Welcome to the Roy Morgan Weekly Update. Let's start with consumer confidence. The latest week's ANZ Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence was up 2.9 points to 87.1. This increase was driven by positive moves in all 5 underlying questions comprising the index. To really understand what's going on beneath the surface with consumer confidence, we need to delve into the components of the index. Now, the index consists of 5 questions, 2 about personal finances. Would you say your family's financially better off or worse off than you were this time last year? This time next year, do you and your family expect to be better off or worse off than you are now? There are 2 questions about the Australian economy's performance, thinking about economic conditions in Australia as a whole. In the next 12 months, do you expect we'll have good times financially, bad times, or some good and some bad? And then over the next 5 years, would you expect we'll have continuous good times, bad times, or some good and some bad? And then there's one question about whether now is a good time or a bad time to buy major household items. That's the main driver of this week's increase. The ANZ Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence Rating is the simple, unweighted average of the difference between the percentage of respondents who give a favourable and those who give unfavourable answers to those 5 key questions, plus 100. So the current ANZ Roy Morgan result of 87.1 is clearly well below the neutral level of 100. In fact, more Australians are giving a negative response to all 5 questions than positive responses. So all questions are currently in negative territory. This has been the case since early September. At that time, the question related to personal finances over the next year was briefly in positive territory, following the Reserve Bank's last interest rate cut in mid-August. Since then, all 5 questions have been in negative territory for the last 11 weeks. Over the last 2 weeks, consumer confidence itself has increased by 3.6 points, and most of that increase has been driven by a single question, that one related to buying conditions. The question relating to whether now is a good time or a bad time to buy major household items has increased by a net 11 percentage points over the last 2 weeks, heading into this week's Black Friday sales weekend. Good time to buy has increased from 20% 2 weeks ago to 27%, up 7 points, and bad time to buy has decreased from 37% down to 33%. Overall, a net increase of 11 points. In fact, this is the largest 2-week jump for this question since November 2023, also leading into Black Friday, 2 weeks ago when the question jumped by a net 12 percentage points. Unfortunately though, this also means the results for this question are likely to drop away in December and perhaps drag the whole index down again, leading into Christmas. Inflation expectations are up. The weekly ANZ Roy Morgan inflation expectations increased 0.2% to 5.4% this week. So Australians are now expecting annual inflation of 5.4% each year over the next 2 years. That's the highest level of inflation expectations for nearly 2 years, in fact since December 2023. And now to mortgage stress. The latest Roy Morgan estimates show mortgage stress down in October by 0.6%. So now 25.3% of Australians with a mortgage are at risk of mortgage stress, an estimated 1,330,000 Australians. Mortgage stress has proven sensitive to interest rate decisions and has now declined by 2.6% following the Reserve Bank's decision to cut interest rates in August to 3.6%. This is the lowest level of mortgage stress for almost 3 years, since early 2023. And finally today, the latest Roy Morgan readership figures for the 12 months to September 2025 show that news continues to matter to the vast majority of Australians. 97% of Australians, an estimated 22.4 million, consume news in any given month, either in newspapers or digitally via online outlets or apps. The most widely read category of news remains the general news category, with a unique audience, meaning they're read by 22 million Australians. That's equivalent to 96% of the population. Property continues to be highly popular, with more than 2/3 of Australians, 70%, turning to the property section, the second most popular overall. In third place is sport, read by 12.9 million Australians, or 56% of the population, followed by entertainment and culture on 11.9 million Australians, lifestyle and health, 11.2 million, and business and finance, read by 9.7 million Australians. A look at the top brands in news in Australia show ABC News has the largest unique audience at 12.6 million Australians, just in front of news.com.au with a unique audience of 12 million, both reaching over 50% of the population. Other widely read news brands include nine.com.au with an audience of 10 million, 7news.com.au with 8.1 million, The Guardian and Sydney Morning Herald with 7.8 million, and the Daily Mail with 7.7 million, all reaching over 30% of Australians. Turning now to magazines. The latest Roy Morgan figures on magazine readership released today show more than 14.6 million Australians read magazines, either in print or online. The two most widely read magazines now are Coles Magazine, with a readership of 4.7 million Australians, and Fresh Ideas from Woolworths, with a readership of more than 4.3 million Australians. The most widely read paid magazines are Better Homes and Gardens, with a readership of 1.66 million, The Australian Woman's Weekly, with a readership around 1.2 million, and National Geographic, with a readership of more than 1 million. For detailed information on the latest Roy Morgan readership figures for magazines and newspapers and the Think News Brands analysis, visit the Roy Morgan website. Looking forward to next week, I'll be back to bring you the latest data for consumer confidence, inflation expectations, and the latest on New Zealand voting intention and confidence. Thanks for listening. See you next time.